The National Desk, America's News, now.
Grounded no more. Boeing's 737 MAX 9 planes have been cleared off. When the fleet of troubled aircraft will be back in the skies.
I've been told, I don't know how many times, this is the best deal ever. And they won't let us see it. They won't let you see it. They won't let the public see it. I mean, let us see it.
A once-thought done deal on a border security package is headed for defeat. And proponents for the bill say it wasn't killed by senators. Coming up, who they say orchestrated the opposition. Then a new health crisis held in your hand. Why some political leaders are equating social media with tobacco use. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. Boeing 737 MAX 9 planes could be back in the air as early as tomorrow. This following the FAA's decision to allow planes to fly again once they have passed inspection. All Boeing 737 MAX 9 planes have been grounded since a door blew off an Alaska Airlines flight back on January 5th. Alaska Airlines indicated they will resume using their 65 MAX 9 fleet Friday after canceling as many as 3,000 flights in the past 3 weeks. United Airlines plans to resume their grounded planes on Sunday. Boeing's CEO Dave Calhoun was on Capitol Hill today for a second day of closed-door testimony with senators. Right now, 33 million people in several states on the East Coast at risk for severe weather. Over the next few days, parts of the Southeast could get heavy rain and flash flooding. Freezing rain could impact portions of the Northeast, and unusually warm temperatures. Many of us are experiencing that right now. Those are going to continue to spread over the East Coast and parts of Ohio and the Tennessee valleys. Developing now, CIA Director Bill Burns set to meet with officials from Qatar, Egypt, and the director of Israel's spy agency Mossad as they try to break a deadlock holding up the release of hostages in Gaza. Now, the sticking point between Israel and Hamas continues to be the same, the question of a ceasefire. Hamas wants an all-out stop to the hostilities. Israel says it will only accept a temporary pause in fighting. Meantime, in Gaza, new video is showing a chaotic scene after an apparent Israeli airstrike hit a crowd of people waiting for aid near Gaza City, leaving 20 dead and 150 people injured, according to health authorities in the Hamas-run enclave. The Israeli military did not immediately respond to a request for comment, but according to the Associated Press, said it was looking into the claims. It comes just a day before the International Court of Justice is set to give a preliminary decision on accusations Israel is committing genocide. South Africa's government has requested an order that would temporarily halt Israel's Gaza offensive, citing acts by Israel's military and statements by senior officials that it said demonstrated intent to commit genocide against Palestinians. Israel has vehemently denied the accusation, saying it is only targeting Hamas, whose tactics it blames for the high level of civilian casualties. If the court agrees with South Africa on there being a justifiable probe, a halt in fighting could be ordered until a full case on the matter is heard. Developing now, the controversial execution of an Alabama prisoner just under an hour away. At 6 p.m. local time, the state is scheduled to move forward with plans to use nitrogen gas on inmate Kenneth Smith, a method that's never been used before. The state says it's a painless and humane execution method, but critics say it's an experimental method that could amount to torture. It comes after the U.S. Supreme Court and an appeals court rejected Smith's arguments against the execution. Jennifer Crumbley, the mother of a Michigan school shooter, Ethan Crumbley, will testify in her own defense as her manslaughter trial got underway today with opening statements. Jennifer, along with her husband James, are facing manslaughter charges for their role in the 2021 shooting that left 4 dead and 7 others injured. While their son Ethan pulled the trigger, prosecutors say the parents negligently made a gun accessible to their son and ignored his mental health needs. The couple has pleaded not guilty. In Texas, our reporters are looking into law enforcement efforts to prevent mass shootings like the 2022 Uvalde tragedy. A new DOJ report mentions best practices like something called a go bag. The National Desk's Jordan Elder explains.
The idea of a go bag is longstanding. It was recommended in the alert report right after the Uvalde tragedy and again in the DOJ report. The Bexar County Sheriff's Office told us a month after the Robb Elementary shooting that they wanted to have breaching equipment like this in every car.
Where does that effort stand now?
We've got all of our patrol deputies equipped.
Sheriff Javier Salazar says they used asset forfeiture funds to get these tools. Here's what they look like. They're also training school district police on how to use their equipment.
So that way, if a deputy were responding to an active shooter event in a school, God forbid, they could literally toss those tools to a school district officer, and that officer knows how to use our tools.
San Antonio police tell us each substation has ballistic shields, breaching equipment, and department-issued rifles assigned to certain trained officers. The Department of Public Safety is also working on getting these go bags. In an internal letter we obtained from July 2022, DPS Director McCraw told staff that the goal was to have one for every trooper. I went through DPS's budget request for this year and found that it's still listed as a priority, but it's unclear if that goal has been reached. We requested a status update, but did not get a response. However, policing experts tell us it's not always about the equipment. It's about the officer using it.
Is it an enabler? Is it a tool? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, it's the human that operates the tool.
The Department of Justice report says that there aren't requirements for what tools police need to respond to an active shooter. They say it really depends on the size and resources of your agency, but it did offer some best practices like a go bag containing door breaching equipment and ballistic shields.
The response that we got in conjunction with our partners at the school district has been stellar. And so, again, I have to think that we're prepared here.
Jordan Elder, Fox SA.
Donald Trump's attorneys have called for a full dismissal of charges levied by Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis in Georgia. The motion filed in court today references the alleged misconduct between the DA and her lead prosecutor. A co-defendant in the election subversion case previously filed to dismiss the case, alleging the two attorneys were engaged in an improper romantic relationship with financial motivations. Fani Willis will appear in court next month, where she's expected to respond to the allegations. While in New York, Donald Trump testified this afternoon for about 4 minutes in his defamation fight with columnist E. Jean Carroll. While on the stand, he called the accusations totally false, but the judge struck that testimony from the record as Trump was instructed not to suggest she lied. Following his testimony, the defense rested their case. Trump is expected to be back in court tomorrow when the trial resumes. And former Trump advisor Peter Navarro will spend 4 months in prison and pay a $9,500 fine for refusing to cooperate in the congressional January 6th investigation. Prosecutors were seeking 6 months and a fine of $200,000. New York City is now the first major city in the country to designate social media as a public health crisis. Dozens of states are already taking legal action against certain platforms for allegedly putting children in harm's way. The National Desk's Achal Nashar has a closer look at the issues social media companies say they're now working to fix.
The mayor of America's biggest city taking on an issue parents across the country wrestle with every day.
Companies like TikTok, YouTube, Facebook are fueling a mental health crisis by designing their platforms with addictive and dangerous features.
New York City Mayor Eric Adams comparing social media to tobacco and guns. The city's health commissioner, Dr. Ashwin Vasan, issuing an advisory encouraging adults who interact with kids to implement tech-free times, discuss social media use in an open-minded way, and model healthy social media use.
We cannot stand by and let big tech monetize our children's privacy and jeopardize their mental health.
Scientific research is inconclusive. The American Psychological Association notes using social media is not inherently beneficial or harmful to young people. Platforms have been taking steps to address concerns. On Thursday, Meta, which owns Instagram and Facebook, added measures to protect minors from unwanted direct messages. And coming soon, a parental control for teens with supervised accounts if they want to change a setting.
Like who can message them, what their privacy of their account is, what their sensitive content control setting is. To anything more open, their parent is going to have to approve that.
Meta tells us it's not commenting directly on Mayor Adams' remarks, but said the use of the word addiction is often political, not scientific, and pointed us to their other safety features they say directly refute claims its platforms are dangerous, like help alerts for self-harm and eating disorders. Meta also facing a lawsuit brought by New Mexico's Attorney General, arguing Facebook and Instagram put minors in physical danger, alleging human traffickers searched Facebook for attractive young girls and sent them messages telling them that they were pretty and asking if they would like to make some money.
Now, Meta also tells us they work with the authorities and child safety experts to root out predators on their sites. Amira, in just 1 month alone, they tell us they disabled more than 500,000 accounts for violating its child safety policies.
And Atra, we will hear directly from some top tech CEOs next week. What should we expect?
Right. This will be before the Senate Judiciary Committee. They're calling the CEOs of Meta, X, formerly Twitter, TikTok, Snap, and Discord to testify next week, Wednesday, for a hearing focused on online child exploitation. And if it is anything like past tech hearings, it'll be tense, to put it mildly, especially considering the CEOs of Discord, Snap, and X had to be subpoenaed. Amira?
All eyes will be watching. Atra Al-Nashar live in Washington, D.C. for us. Thank you. And coming up, the latest at the southern border as the fight over razor wire continues and lawmakers try to come to an agreement. Then dozens of people in Seattle say they were injured by police during the 2020 BLM protests. Why they're still outraged after a major lawsuit settlement was announced. And later, nearly 80 years since the end of the Holocaust, some people still deny it. Despite the pictures, the videos, and all the documentation, we're going to hear from a survivor when we come back. Negotiations continue in the Senate on a bipartisan deal for border security. Senator Chris Murphy believes we will know in the next 1 to 2 days if an agreement can be reached at all. A framework was in place earlier this week, but without enough GOP support. And so now we're learning that former President Donald Trump is urging senators to kill the bill until he is president again.
We have a crisis at the border. The American people are suffering as a result of what's happening at the border, and someone running for president ought to try and get the problem solved, as opposed to saying, "Hey, save that problem. Don't solve it. Let me take credit for solving it later."
House leadership has said any Senate deal that does not include H.R. 2, which it does not at the moment, is dead on arrival in the lower chamber. Meanwhile, Texas Governor Abbott says he will continue to block Border Patrol from getting into a part of his state and cutting through the razor wire, even though the Supreme Court just sided with the Biden administration on the matter. Our Christine Frizzell reports.
The standoff at the southern border not letting up. Instead of allowing the federal government to cut through the razor wire in Eagle Pass, the state of Texas is installing more. In a statement, Governor Greg Abbott declaring the federal government has broken the compact between the United States and the states.
The authors of the Constitution knew there would be times when the federal government would not live up to its duty. And so they empowered states in Article 1, Section 10, the right of self-defense.
This despite the U.S. Supreme Court siding with the Biden administration, which argued it alone has the federal authority to secure the border and to remove the razor wire as it sees fit, which the White House says is necessary.
It's unfortunate that there is a governor in Texas, Governor Abbott, who has politicized this issue of what's happening on the border. And it's not making people's lives safer. It's actually making it harder for law enforcement at the border to do their job.
This battle between the state and federal government has been unfolding as the federal government has been trying to take action, with bipartisan legislation in the Senate nearing completion, but now facing a new hurdle, with more and more Republicans publicly opposing it.
This supplemental bill is a kamikaze plane in a box canyon with no exit, headed for a train wreck.
Others blame an empowered Donald Trump for trying to tank the deal.
The border is a very important issue for Donald Trump, and the fact that he would communicate to Republican senators and congresspeople that he doesn't want us to solve the border problem because he wants to blame Biden for it is really appalling.
As the drama deepens in Texas, more and more evidence of the impact nationwide, including more than 2,000 miles away at Boston's Logan Airport, where more than 100 migrants are said to be taking shelter. Other options and resources running out. I'm Christine Frizzell reporting for the National Desk, America's News Now.
Well, the U.S. economy saw a strong end to 2023. The Commerce Department reported today the U.S. GDP grew 3.3% in the fourth quarter of last year when compared to a year earlier. The total GDP growth for 2023 was 2.5%. Also, inflation numbers improved. Excluding food and energy prices, inflation hit 2%, which is in line with the target of the Fed when it comes to lowering those interest rates. But when it comes to rent, prices have never been this unaffordable. According to a new report from the Harvard Joint Center for Housing Studies, half of American renters spend more than 30% of their income on housing. That's a record 22.4 million people considered to be cost burdened. And nearly half of those households, 12.1 million, have housing costs that eat up more than 50% of their income, another all-time high. And new tonight, a new warning about cough medicine. Certain Robitussin cough syrups are being recalled for microbial contamination. Its manufacturer says Robitussin Honey CF Max Day Adult and Robitussin Honey CF Max Adult bottles are impacted here. Those batches should be thrown out. There have been no reports of anyone getting sick. Gene therapy holds the potential to restore hearing in children with genetic deafness. A new study followed 6 children with a type of hereditary deafness in a clinical trial. The researchers put an inactive virus carrying a working version of a certain gene into the kids' inner ears. 5 of those 6 regained their hearing. The researchers now plan to broaden the study, but it's looking very promising. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering the issues that matter most to you. We're taking the pulse of America.
Heart attacks, PTSD, and even a coma. These protesters say none of it would have happened had Seattle police acted differently during 2020's unrest.
I didn't expect to go home with my flesh rendered and bleeding.
For that, the city has agreed to pay these BLM protesters $200,000 each.
They must realize What a rotten thing they did to these protesters.
Yet all is still not calm. In announcing this settlement, City Attorney Ann Davison said the city admits no wrongdoing, sparking outrage from the lawyer representing this group.
More than 1,000 workers are losing their jobs at Google. The same goes for people getting pink-slipped at eBay.
These kind of mass layoffs represent a tiny, tiny fraction of that overall month-to-month change in the marketplace.
Economist Dr. Christopher Thornburg says during the pandemic, big tech was making a mint on streaming services and online shopping platforms. A correction had to come.
Suddenly, that luster has worn off all these tech companies, and they're realizing they overexpanded in the midst of that awkward time, and now they have to get back to, if you will, a more reasonably sized workforce.
County engineer Greg Wilkins found 5 bridges in poor or critical condition in Butler County, most of which are more than 100 years old. 3 of those are owned by Norfolk Southern. That's the railroad that had its train derail in East Palestine last year, spilling millions of gallons of chemicals and causing a massive chemical burnoff. Because they're not public structures, the responsibility for inspecting and maintaining those bridges falls on the railroads who own them. And under a law passed by Congress 6 years ago, only local officials can ask for those inspection records through the Federal Railroad Administration, or FRA, and the records are not public.
Coming up, International Holocaust Remembrance Day is this weekend, and more people are believing the lie that it never happened. A survivor shares her first-hand account of the tragedy right after this. This Saturday is International Holocaust Remembrance Day, and tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern on your local station's website, as well as at thenationaldesk.com, we are presenting the next installment of our Sinclair series on anti-Semitism in America, Hate Rising, Holocaust Denial. One of our guests for this really critical discussion is Charlotte Plotsky, a Holocaust survivor who was a little girl when the Nazis invaded her home country of Belgium.
I was born in Antwerp, Belgium. Belgium was invaded by the Germans, which was May 10th, 1940. It was a horrific time. One day, I heard this whistling noise, and I had been trained, if I heard this whistling noise, I was to throw myself flat on the ground, because that was probably going to be one of the Stuckers, because they would shriek. They put these little whistles on them so they would terrify people when they came down. It was the worst bombardment of that particular operation. It lasted from 7 at night till 6 a.m. the following morning. It was horrible. Everybody's nerves were shot. And I kept saying, Mom, Mommy, make it stop, you know, and she would try and cover my ears with the pillow. There's bombing, you're hiding in the basement, you don't know what to do or where to go. And I picked up on, you know, all this fear and anxiety. Everything was flattened. The whole town was flattened around us. People were running around. There were bodies sticking out of the ground. There were, a man was running around, you know, where is my wife? Where is my wife? There are some dead bodies around and floating in the water and on the beach, and there were wounded and abandoned tanks and all kinds of things. We really fled with nothing.
This was in civilized society. This was, you know, a sophisticated Europe where 6 million Jews were murdered, annihilated. 2/3 of European Jewry were decimated. And it didn't start with the gas chambers. It started with words, with acts, with legislation, where hatred of Jews became tolerated and accepted.
And you can hear more of Charlotte's story tonight as she joins our panel starting at 7 p.m. The special streaming exclusively on thenationaldesk.com and your local news websites. We'll be right back. Well, it's the iconic tulle tutu worn by Sarah Jessica Parker in the HBO series Sex and the City, just selling for, get this, $52,000. The skirt, made out of layers of white tulle, was worn by the character Carrie Bradshaw in the opening credits of the show between 1998 and 2004. You likely recognize it. And get this, it pulled in over 4 times more than the $12,000 originally expected. But for reference, the black velvet dress worn by Princess Diana, that sold for $325,000. So there's a lot more it could have gone for, that's for sure. That does it for this edition of the National Desk. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful evening.